everybody. Welcome to the Evolution Security Podcast. This is Aaron and Eric Davis, the Tactical Twins. We are here again for another awesome show with another awesome guest. I am glad to be here. And Eric, since we have a really good friend of yours on, I'm going to pass it on to you to bring him in. Excuse me.
Excellent. So for audience members out there, we certainly have a very special guest, a gentleman that has become a superb, excellent friend of mine. He is also a coach of mine. And we want to welcome Chris Currie to the show, who is a recent Pan Am's gold medalist just a couple of weeks ago. I should remember the dates. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you guys very much, and been trying to get on here for a year, according to Eric. But last year was silver, so this year's gold, so it made it more interesting, I guess.
Yeah, well, it absolutely just didn't fall together. Silver was just as interesting, frankly.
Eric, you told me you didn't want to have him on until he had gold. Quit lying.
I believe that.
Not at all.
And
Yeah, Chris.
It's good to finally meet you, Aaron, somewhat face to face, even
Yes,
remotely.
sir. Yes, great to meet you over the computer here too, buddy.
Yeah, I've heard your voice many times, which sounds dangerously close to Eric's anyway. So when we listen to the podcast, and the twin thing is in full effect for sure. Although Eric and I are twinning our Hold Fast shirts.
That's right.
I noticed that. There's a whole twin thing going on here.
That's right.
Well, and Chris, frankly, just to that point, it has taken us way too long to have you on here. You have a lot of value for our audience, and again, I love talking you up all the time about what you do for our gym, and Lee King is our instructor, our black belt, but Chris is heading towards brown belt real soon. That's just my thoughts on the things, but Chris absolutely is the primary assistant coach, and he's well known around the gym. He helps everybody. And on a funny note, Chris, when you guys were at Pans, you may recall I opened and ran open mat.
Yeah.
And so invariably I end up doing a lot of coaching. And I think it was either Dane or Chip said, "Hey, yeah, Eric, you're our Chris today."
Well, I have a love of jiu-jitsu, and I like seeing people do well, and I also have a big mouth that likes to run all the time, so it's not hard to get me talking about the things that I like. So especially on the mats, it's a happy.
But at the same time, Chris, though, I don't think you're, I think you do talk, but it's not at all noticeable. Like some people like, man, that dude never shuts up.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. No. You haven't been around Gina too much, have you?
I've been around Gina just a little bit, but speaking of which, if she's in earshot, if not, that's okay. But say hello to Gina for us.
I will do.
Your wonderful bride.
Thank you.
So, well, with that said, Chris, for our audience members that may not know you, just give us a quick bio where you came from and, what brought you to where you are right now, buddy.
So like, as far as jiu-jitsu and martial arts goes, of course, I'm in my 50s. So I was born in 1970, which meant I spent Saturday mornings watching Kung Fu theater and all the old martial arts movies and the Bruce Lee movies. So I always grew up with that culture. And by the time I could do martial arts, Taekwondo and karate were kind of the only available arts. And that was all we were really interested in anyway, because, that's already what was touted with, Chuck Norris and that media culture. So I did that for several years as a kid into like early teenage years. and then broke away from that in, typical high school fashion, and moving on, and kind of got really interested in music. So in most of my 20s were spent pursuing the music dream, being in, several bands and being in a couple of, serious bands where we really, gave it a good shot. And then when my 30s were spent with having my son, and he had some early medical difficulties. He was born somewhat early. So the 30s were kind of spent um, working a lot, working a couple of jobs, getting different education, kind of building a career so we could support the family, because my wife had to, at that point, stay home and homeschool him. And so I didn't, all the while I was always interested in martial arts. I was getting books, the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and
Yep.
any kung fu book I could get a hold of, or things like that. And but the business of living and family kind of took precedent over a lot of that, especially once the music pursuit was kind of over. And so by my 40s, Caleb, my son, is getting some age on him, and he's never really interested in sports so much, but I definitely wanted him doing something physical, and I was always had a passion for martial arts, and at least he showed some interest in it. So we started looking to get him some training. And I'd always heard the words karate and taekwondo and hapkido, and kung fu. These were the buzzwords that I grew up with. And even though I was around during UFC one, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu wasn't as much of a buzzword for me. So when I went out looking for martial arts, I was typically looking for your more traditional arts. And we started him when he was around 10, at a professed Hapkido school locally. And he liked it, but we didn't really completely approve of the methods, the methodology, and we weren't getting what I wanted out of it for him. So we parted ways with that school, and then ended kind of like on a whim, ended up at Martial Arts Academy of Southern Pines, which is where Hold Fast JiuJitsu lives. And they had a combat Hapkido program, which is under ICHF, under Pellegrini. And it was a stripped down version of Hapkido, where they didn't do forms or katas or things like that. It was more of clinch work, more self-defense oriented stuff. And that's really where I wanted, at least for him to get. So, and at the same time, they taught Wing Chun as a secondary art within that class. So he started, and of course, within a couple of months, I couldn't stand it, and I was on the mats with him. So, because I kept watching it, trying to learn it vicariously through him. But then I just got on the mats with him, and we did it together. So we look, and you talk about like Lee King is our black belt, our instructor. His instructor was Roy Marsh, who was I've never taken jiu-jitsu under Roy other than a seminar, but I took Wing Chun and Hapkido from Roy for most of that before he moved to Germany. So Caleb and I did that for a couple of years, and I got my black belt in Hapkido. But all the while, you're leaving the Hapkido class, and the jiu-jitsu class is right after. And that we have a nice big building, but everybody kind of knows each other. And you meet, all the instructors for the other arts, and you see, all the MMA guys, and you see the jiu-jitsu guys. And so Lee and I knew each other once he came back from Colorado, and Roy was still teaching there. And the program was starting to get handed off to Lee during those months before Roy left. And, Lee and I got to be, acquaintances at least. And I would always, piqued my interest. I wasn't initially attracted to jiu-jitsu at first because it just, didn't give the grappling part of it a chance. But after watching it and sitting on the sidelines, and I'd stay and watch a couple of minutes of class and watch their warm-ups and watch a couple of their drills, and those monitoring lingerings kept getting longer and longer, while I was just kind of sitting there watching the class. And then Lee would come over and I'd ask him a couple of questions and we talk a little bit. And then he said, why don't you just come to open mat? And so like for 2 or 3 months, I would actually come to open mat and get on the mats and roll around with Lee and some of the other people there, and just kind of getting familiar with what was going on there. And eventually I was like, okay, I've got to dive into this. So, I talked to Gina. I was like, I need to try this art for a while. So I was teaching Hapkido and then changing my gi and then learning, taking my black belt off and putting my white belt on and going to jiu-jitsu. And at that point, Lee had fully taken over. So, I spent, a couple of months just getting to know Lee and everybody in the jiu-jitsu program and kind of getting somewhat, at least an introduction to jiu-jitsu before actually taking the class. The story is that myself and 2 other people were like Lee's first 3 initial students. Everybody else Lee inherited from Roy, and I was actually his. And I'm the Victor comes back, from time to time when he trains with his wife. He met his wife on the mats, but I'm the only one that's like has been there from June of 2017 until now, every week, every month, every year, every promotion with Lee. So I'm like his original student, his original full-time first student. So that's kind of like a side
That's
note.
awesome.
But, I fell in love with jiu-jitsu while, to back up a little bit with karate and taekwondo and hapkido and even Wing Chun. I love the arts, but there was always a difficulty pressure testing with especially when you get in like striking arts. You do want to get punched in the face. Now, granted, with like MMA programs, they have and you got to they have more of a system with gloves and shin pads and things like that. But when you're talking about like serious wrist locks and finger locks and clinch work, and you have to be careful. The techniques are awesome, but every time I would get a couple of guys like who were as dedicated as I was to trying to get really good at Hapkido, it was difficult to truly pressure test without hurting each other and like having sprained wrists and sprained elbows, and because when you're trying to like pressure test those things, it was difficult. Whereas with jiu-jitsu, because there's so much emphasis on control first, I immediately increasingly got more attracted to that aspect of it, where we could, even if we didn't go for submissions or joint locks or whatever, just the fact that your body on body and all that energy is pushing all the time. And that I was like, okay, now I'm getting the pressure test I want almost all the time, at least not quite to a true self-defense situation, but because I kept finding out every time I was trying to pressure test with some of the other arts, when it got heated, I was doing the wrong things, where I was kind of like shying away, or I was giving up my back, or I was turning away because now the punches are getting real. Now the grabbing is getting real. Whereas just a couple of months into jiu-jitsu, those things were going away. The fear of confrontation, the fear of that initial conflict was going away because of that constant, ability to roll and come dangerously close to the intensity of a confrontation or a conflict. So if that makes any sense with all that rambling.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Oh,
and Chris, you mentioned pressure testing is probably something that is a very, very common word on this show, and of course that being under the, if you will, the tutelage of Craig Douglas through the ShivWorks family, that pressure testing is crucial. As you know, we've had some of those conversations.
Oh yeah.
So great introduction to how you got there. One of the things I did want to mention, Chris, and you might be able to help me remember exactly how it took place, but I had seen you, and I didn't know it was you. I don't, this is the way that I remember it, but I remember it's actually my wife. She said, "Hey, there's a guy right up the street has jujitsu mats, and it looked like they were training jujitsu inside his garage."
Oh yeah.
And so I'm like, awesome. And I had passed by there, and I think I saw you and maybe some other guys. I was like, man, I need to introduce myself. But then fast forward to me showing up at the gym.
Yeah. That's where we actually met.
Yep, absolutely. And we were talking, and just, I mean, even like the first time we met, somehow we got on that subject that we lived in the same neighborhood. I said, "Hey, hold on a second. Are you the house that's
on the corner
right up on the?"
with the Brazilian and American flags in the garage? And yeah, because
Yeah.
I mean, I think typically, like when I meet people, especially at the gym, the standard question is, what's your name? Where are you from? Where did you train before? Are you ranked? I learned to ask that quickly. And we have so many SF and special operations guys around. You know how you ask limited questions and then know when to stop. You're like, okay, you're on brag. You have a beard, but you're not. So when we met, and I was like, "Where'd you move in?" You said, "Well, I'm in Rayford." I was like, "I'm in Rayford too. Where are you?" Steeplechase. I said, "Yep, I'm there." And you're like, "Okay, are you the guy?" And we're like, "Yes." We connected all those dots, and because during COVID, when we were shut down for a couple of months, that was, we say, may or may not have been a group of renegades who got together and fought each other, including Lee and Jared and some other guys from the gym, come over, and we beat the crap out of each other for 2 or 3 hours at the time. But
I guarantee, Aaron, you go ahead. You're going to say something.
I was just going to say, but you guys for surely wore your face diapers, right? So everything was good. No COVID spread in the gym or in the garage.
sure.
Yeah,
Everything's crossed.
Yeah, it's funny. At some point, you think about, but I'll phrase it this way. I guarantee you that was some killer training going on. You got some nice mats. You got a good space there. I guarantee some good ass training was going down.
Well,
and of course I got to train there
yeah.
with you and Lee and a couple of the other guys.
Yeah.
Multiple times. I think, Aaron, I told you about that, didn't I? Told you that they had a guy that was at the gym that got to train in his garage. Maybe I didn't.
Yeah.
I could have sworn
You mentioned it a couple of times on the podcast.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but
where the garage fighters were. And yes, we did. It's amazing. You have to, like, as you train, and I guess everything, but I can only really speak to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This is the art that I've fallen in love with the most, that I've devoted probably the most time and brain power to, dissecting and trying to learn it as well as I can. But you get into routines and ruts and things like that in any of your training. But those 3 months in the garage, with Lee especially, and then the guys that came in, and like Lee always kind of promotes a little slower than some gyms. So when I say some of the guys were white belts, they were still very challenging. But because we weren't doing lessons, we were doing more exploration and experimentation. Um, there's a lot of plateaus got busted those 3 months. We were just and then just constantly we had the freedom to explore some things we might not have taken when we had a class of 30 where half of them or more are white belts or beginners, and you have to kind of make sure we're catering to everybody. We didn't have to cater to anybody but ourselves, and we just I feel like I grew the most those 3 months of just about any. And I was a blue belt at the time, so I had a couple of years under my belt anyway. And yeah, those were some good times with a lot of growth all at once.
Well, Chris, I think I've told you this story, and we can move on to a couple other subjects. I had a similar opportunity. So I'll digress a second. One of my good friends, and, I got my blue belt before him.
Yeah.
So that's why it's where some of these funny things, but it's what my focus was at the time was more ShivWorks stuff, and so I kind of let jiu-jitsu kind of stagnate a little bit over a handful of years. But anyway, well deserved. So Ryan McLean, shout out to Ryan. I was texting back and forth with him just a few days ago, but I was actually in Iraq at the time that he contacted me. He said, "Hey, Eric, are you still doing, like the ShivWorks, the weapons-based stuff?" And I said, "Sure." Because he had taken, Aaron, you may recall the CQS class I used to teach at my gym back in Olympia, was straight up with Craig's permission, his material. And we would pressure test every now and then with either blue guns or even airsoft. But anyway, Ryan took that class several times, but I really didn't think he really cared for it, right? But long story short, because this is about Chris, he contacted me and said, "Hey, it's COVID right now. I know you're about to be back to the States. Um, I would really love to take lessons from you. I'll pay you." And I'm like, "Ryan, what are you talking about, man?" He's a high level brown belt at the time. And I said, "Man, just help me with my jiu-jitsu and I'll help you with your shooting."
Trade.
It was an awesome trade. He and I spent a lot of time at the range together. We did a lot of Greco stuff together, and he liked knife stuff and, working a lot of the number 2 pectoral index in fight weapons access stuff. But man, he helped me drastically in my jiu-jitsu at that point. So I mirrored that. I mean, I had so much growth under him during that period of time, and it was right in my garage.
Yep.
So yeah, it's kind of cool. We had a similar story. So Aaron, you got anything more to add on that? We just move on, or what you think, buddy?
Yeah, man. I think let's get into the meat of this stuff.
Well, Chris, so I know this is a big question, so feel free to expound however you feel. But in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you have, guys like me. I don't compete anymore. That may change, but I haven't competed in about 8 or more years, maybe more, closer to 10. Yeah, about 8 years. But people that compete, it's on a different level, at least of course, it's the sport, but there's so much. I see people that compete, their expansion and capabilities is exponentially different than those that just train in a gym. So I'll ask you this: what does competition mean to you in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
So that that answer is different at different phases of my jiu-jitsu journey. So it's meant different things. Going back to my always question of pressure testing my ability first. So at first, as a white belt, and as a guy in my 40s, I still felt like I needed to, it was always touted as, when you compete, it's the closest thing you'll get to being in a fight where you hopefully will come away not injured. And, we're at least agreeing not to punch each other in the face, although the points are designed to reward you for being in a position where if you were punching in the face, you would have maximum damage, maximum effect. So at first, I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy or look forward to it, but I felt that it was a necessary thing for me. So I'm not speaking for everybody, but for me, and I felt like I needed to do it periodically to face that adrenaline, face that anxiety, face that unknown opponent, and then realizing later that it was more about facing myself. But so as a white belt, it was definitely, does this work? Can I make it work? And because like I said before, when in other arts, when I would get when we would agree to kind of pressure test it, maybe somewhat recklessly at times, my techniques went away, and I was cowering more, I was turning too much, or I was flinching away and retreating more than engaging. Whereas Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gets you comfortable with those situations, you start moving forward anyway. So I wanted to make sure that in that environment that it worked, and it worked for me. So, and we can my attitude towards competition has changed, and once we get into like the mental mindfulness and the mental process, that helped change my attitude towards it as well. But for a while, I just really kind of dreaded it, but I felt like I needed to face it. So I have kind of a weird. My friends and family are sick of hearing it, but I have this motto of facing your dragons. So anything that's a potential obstacle or something that might be kind of scary or might be kind of intimidating, or it's just intimidating because you don't know, to me is a dragon, and I need to face it at least once. And sometimes you find out it's not that big a deal. It was a small little not scary dragon, and sometimes it's a monster that was worth facing. But so at first it was, competition was an intimidating thing that I would do just to kind of keep proving it to myself and keep facing it and keep challenging myself to test what I had learned and if I could apply it. Then as blue belt came around, it devolved for a little while there, and we can get that story later that Eric, you're a part of. And then it changed to, it was just another training tool for me, something to face, something to keep strengthening my mental process, strengthening my readiness. And then by purple belt, it was, I'm thinking more of, I like to teach, I like to share. So the goal would be, to own my own school one day, run my own program. And at this point, it's more about, I want to have the experience of competition to be able to properly teach someone who is also interested in competing from a beginner level, to be able to say, I know what works. I know what book you need to read. I know what tactics work, what competition prep works. I want that experience. So at this point, I don't dread competing anymore, but it's more tactical about what stages I compete on, and how I approach it as a team. And now it's more like experience building so that I can share that information later in a cognitive way.
Excellent question.
So you alluded to it in that section on what competition was to you, and you said the words or at least mindfulness, and giving a hint about what your mental game is. A lot of people say it's all in the mind, but when you really dig into the stuff, it really is all in the mind. But so that makes me wonder, what is your mental preparation for competition? Do you have specific techniques that you use, philosophies, what types of practice you have for your mental preparation, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm going to back up and preface all this with a funny story that Eric knows full well because he was there. And we're going to tie back into the garage days and all this other stuff. So when Eric came in to the gym, it was not far past COVID days. So my garage was still, open a lot, and we were still doing a lot of extra training. And Eric said, when we realized that we were just like one street over from each other, which we currently are, we're on different computers, but I could just about throw a rock and maybe hit the top of his house. But when we met, and he was like, and at that point, Eric was getting back in, like you said, kind of moved back in and trying to get back in jiu-jitsu. So he wanted as much extra time as possible. So I was like, hey, come to my house and we'll do some extra garage fighting. We can drill some stuff. We can whatever, just to get him some more time to get, whatever rust knocked off, if you will. And while we're there, and you're always having conversations. And at white belt, I won probably gold more times than not. And I competed probably quite a bit at white belt. And I didn't lose often. When I got to blue belt, which was, and I didn't do too bad in the gym, and it took a while to compete at blue because of COVID and things like that. And I had a couple of experiences at blue belt, just kind of like, there's a competition happening this weekend. Okay, let's do it. Whatever. And I need to face it, So no prep, no nothing, just run in there and did it. So I had a couple of experiences where, I would lose the first match, and then I kind of like would get my confidence would be up, or I'd be a little bit mad at myself. And then I go out there and then I would be me. Then I would, do everything as well as I could against opponents who were game people, but then I would win, but I'd quit winning like the first spot, or quit winning gold, or even maybe silver even at times, because I was always failing at that first match. And I'm never forget, your brother has you have the same face, but he has a terrible poker face. So Eric and I are sitting on my mats and we're talking about competition. And I said, my problem is I always do well in competition. I just always lose the first match. So, I said, it's a problem with me. And I just kept talking like more about that. I always lose the first match. And Eric just kind of had this look on his face like he was bursting to say something. He says, I got a book I want you to read. He said, we do a podcast. He said, and then the Lanny Bassham with Winning in Mind, what came out of his mouth.
Yeah.
And he said, I got a book I want you to read, and I'll bring it tomorrow. I said, well, just tell me what it is. I'll buy it now. I'm a Kindle book reader. I'm an audio book reader. I'll get it now. And he said, in a matter of fact, and I think you guys I'm not sure. I think Lanny had just been on, but this was his second podcast he did with you guys. So he said, go back and listen to Lanny's first podcast with you guys. And I said, sure, and in my mind, I was like excited about it, but not truly as excited as I was once I read the book, because I'm no stranger to mental models and mental mindfulness, and I'm always like, I want to have a strong mind and all that stuff. And I'm an avid reader, and I'm no stranger to those types of books, but they always left me lacking, because I kind of got bored halfway through, and I realized that all we were doing was the author was kind of self-pumping themselves up about what a bad butt they were. And, I got up and I just did it. And, I ran across the desert and, I was like, you're not telling me how to do it. You're just telling me how well you did it. And like book after book after book, there was no methodology. It's like with jiu-jitsu. If you just went somewhere and you just sat on the mats and watched, two black belts roll, you're never really learning anything. You're paying to take a class, but you have to, I need techniques and I need things broken down. And he said, I really want you to read this book. And he said, I can't wait till you get to certain parts and you're going to recognize how you were just talking. And then, and he said, I'm not going to ruin it for you, but I really want you to read that book. I said, well, I'm down. I'm going to read it. And before I read it, though, I listened to the podcast, which at least Lanny did a good job of within 2 hours or however long the podcast was, of kind of breaking down his philosophy. And I was already like, well, there it is. There I am. I was that triad of the conscious mind, subconscious mind, and the self-image. I had done all the conscious work. My subconscious knew what to do, but after a couple of bad experiences, I started talking myself into that self-image of I'm going to fail the first match, and not realizing that I was just programming myself to do that against people that I probably could beat anyway. And I'm granted, if I lost, somebody's better.
Guaranteed, buddy.
So
that you were better.
Yeah, and once I read, and that's what I loved about that book is yes, he has lots of stories and examples, not just of himself, but of all these other people. And he didn't like drag out for chapters and chapters of this one person's journey. He was just like, okay, here's an event. This is how they did. I asked them what they did. Then he, scientifically kept whittling it down to a process. And just the fact that he could explain, that three mind system, that the self-image drives the subconscious and the conscious, that made all the difference in the world for me. And then, the self-talk, words are powerful. And like I could review that conversation I was having with Eric and listen, and I just knew Eric was like processing through Lanny's system what I was doing to myself. And after I kind of dissected that book, I said, okay, so we're going to put it to the test. And there were a couple of like local, local so for me, there's like IBJJF and like ADCC. These are like the big stuff. And then their local tournaments are your really good tournaments, but they're like your new breeds, your Nagas, and your tap cancer out and things like that. And some of them were coming up, and I was like, okay. And I went through his whole protocol, and I wrote down the goal as it already happened. I changed, and like one thing I want to interrupt myself and bring out, like one thing that Lanny's research did that really opened my eyes to stuff is I knew that words were powerful, but even his breakdown of visualization was amazing to me, because I never realized that I was always watching myself from a camera lens, not from my own vision. And visualizing yourself from outside doesn't work nearly as well as visualizing from like a first person shooter game. You're doing it. So I deliberately changed all that. And I put a lot more effort in that first tournament with Lanny's system, with the writings, the mantra, the triggering and the imprinting. And at the time, since I didn't have any competitions to imprint, I just every time I rolled with an intention to win and then I won, I do like my little trigger word or whatever and imprint that feeling. I'm like, okay, now I'm building my self-image that's what I do. That's what I feel like whenever it happens. And then,
this is like me, right?
Yeah, this is like me.
This is like me.
Yeah, and anytime I didn't win, well, that's not like me. That's okay. Because that was another thing that he did really well in the book that I really took to heart was before I would have like just a ridiculously good match where I did very well and won, and then I would lose to a simple mistake, and that match would eat me up for weeks after. And he was, very good at describing the problem is we don't emphasize our wins and our successes enough when all we do is pay attention to the one match we lost, because then that becomes the like me. That becomes the
self-image.
Yeah, the self-image that, oh, I made that mistake, and then you're always expecting to make that mistake. So I quit worrying. I deliberately kept shifting to the matches that were good, the match that was good, the match that was good. This is what's like me. And then when I had the off match, I was like, well, that was a fluke. Move on. And maybe analyze it for 30 seconds to say, okay, maybe I missed a particular sweep or something else, but just move on from it. Put it on the list to fix, but not obsess about it. And the story that really like resonated with me in the book was he told the story of like a long distance shooter, or no long distance, but like a rifle shooter, Olympic shooter, and was just killing it during the match. And then when he made one mistake and like aimed at the wrong target, he lost the gold because he shot perfectly at the wrong target. But he just turned it off. It's like, well, made that mistake, move on. And then, even though he lost on the biggest stage, he didn't obsess about it. He just like, he had already had that mental preparedness to move on. So having said all that, Lanny's protocols have been my bread and butter ever since. With whatever tournament I would do, is those are the protocols I use. And like with like last year at Pans, I didn't have as much time to prepare for that because the goal was, Lee and I had a goal of doing World Masters like the following year. But I ended up getting my membership a lot earlier than expected. And I was like, well, why don't I do an IBJJF sooner rather than later? What the heck? Hey, Pans is like next month. Let's do that. But I was already so used to doing Lanny's protocol that it wasn't like I had to go research it. And I already kind of knew, and I already had those triggers, and I had, my mindset ready. And so this story isn't necessarily to like aggrandize me, but aggrandize Lanny's process was going into like, I know a lot of people have like a love-hate relationship with IBJJF, but it's when you go to a local tournament and then you go to one of those Grand Slam tournaments, you feel there's a difference. There's those people who have, their money, their vacation, their flights, they're coming from all over the world to give their absolute best for 5 minutes because they've only got one shot. So for me to go, having never even stepped on the IBJJF stage, and to go to Florida, had never competed at purple belt. It was like a year. I think I was a purple belt for a year, and just hadn't had really the opportunity to compete. And then, I was thinking at that point again, I kind of wanted thinking of a future school. I wanted the clout of an IBJJF medal to, not to discount anything else, but, you kind of need something that you put on your wall that when they walk in, okay, if you're a Pans champion, that means you've done it on a higher level, or at least a higher anxiety level, I should say. So anyway, to go down there, first tournament in IBJJF, first tournament as a purple belt, and did all of Lanny's protocols. Won my first two matches, was in the finals, and the only mistake that I made going into the finals wasn't even technique wise. It was I let my foot off the gas in between the semifinals and the finals. There was like 30 minutes in between. And I just kind of relaxed and turned into me and started hanging out and talking with everybody, and like got too cooled down physically, and just like chumming with everybody. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I got to go fight in the finals. And now I'm like, I kind of, but that doesn't bother me. And the guy that I fought was like, he was great. He won gold at World Masters as well. I mean, he's done a really good job, and he knew how to play the game. We got into a position where he was up 2-0, and just held me down for a long time. And I was gassed at that point. And by the time I kind of got back to myself and got my second win going, it was a little too late to recover. But I didn't like. Whereas 2 years before, that would have just killed me. I was like, the goal was that close to me, and I let it slip away by some silliness. And but I was like, well, first Pans ever, and I got silver. Just decided to do it a couple of weeks ago. Not too shabby. And I focused more on my 2 wins. I was like, there's some game competitors, and actually, my first match was against the number 1 seed, because I'd never come in. I was like ranked last, and I eliminated him like a lot of points to nothing in my first match. So those were the matches that I focused on and watched over and over. If I wanted to watch them, I watched my matches that I won.
Yeah.
And the last one, I just said, okay, next year I need an answer for somebody to hold me down a half guard. But that was it. I didn't have any anxiety about it. I was like, move on and add, but like you say, keep using Lanny's self-image. That was just me. I knew what to do. So, in a matter of fact, like fast forward to a year where we went back to Pans, a couple weeks back, and went to my first match. Had a really good match. Had scored a lot of points. Didn't have a lot of good submission opportunities I was willing to chase at risk of losing control. So I was content to win that one by points. And then as I came off the mat, Lee met me in the bullpen, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Don't take your foot off the pedal. Don't talk to anybody." It was like
Awesome.
That was the only 2 things that we took away from the year before. That's all. And we didn't even really talk about it until that moment, other than, when we would advise our teammates while we were getting ready, where we're having, comp prep, for like 3 months before Pans. It was always practice not taking your foot off the pedal, practice rolling hard, taking a round off, then rolling hard again. Maybe take roll hard, take 2 rounds off. We were just practicing that instead of obsessing about I lost for some mistakes. So it was like minor course correction, and that a year later we corrected it, and then won both my matches, and they were both very game competitors, and got gold a year later. So I can attest to all your readers, and I know like everybody who's listens to your podcast is very aware of With Winning in Mind, 3rd edition by Lanny Bassham. But I'm just another witness to that testimony that if you apply it and take a minute to understand what he's saying in the book, that is the only book that I recommend to anybody for mental management or preparation.
Well, Chris, first off, there's 2 things I'm going to say, actually, and I have an additional story too. Is that, yes, I remember that conversation vividly that we had in your garage, and I did think that, and I probably was going, man, I got to tell him about With Winning in Mind, and to be honest with you, Chris, I left it at that. I knew you read it, but I didn't say anything more about it. You probably have gathered that I haven't asked you about it, right? And so, but here's the thing: I started seeing you win.
Yep.
I started seeing you win and win and win, and then your silver at Pans last year, and then your gold this year. So here's and I think I told you, when we were at class the other day, but I watched all your matches, right? And you were completely in your you were your best performer self. I could see it in your face, your composure. And I knew when I was watching you, I said, his mind is in the right place. He's going to win. I said at your first match, and you may recall that I said that to you.
Oh,
I
yeah.
said, I knew deep down that you were going to win. And I especially knew you were going to win when I watched your composure. So very much congratulations. And I'm very, very glad that that book and passing that information on to you has helped you. It's very humbling. It was just a conduit,
Oh, yeah.
But here's another really cool story is, and you've probably heard me mention, it was Mike Brown, who's a
Yep.
black belt under Jean-Jacques Machado. Mike Brown and Aaron can attest to this too. I've said this to you as well, Chris, is that Mike Brown is the most accomplished person I know. Everything he's set his mind to, he has excelled at.
Mm-hmm.
IDPA national champion at the expert level, IDPA multi-time top 5 in masterclass. He was a Div 1 wrestler. Everything he did, he excelled at. And then again, he's like, well, I think I'm going to focus on jiu-jitsu. And next thing we know, he wins brown belt gold at Masters Worlds in no gi, and then also gi, right? But he was not doing well at black belt. I had no clue that he was suffering mental hangups and I think I sent you what he wrote after after he won silver at black belt at Master Worlds this last year.
Mm-hmm.
I had no clue because it was a shock to me. I'm like, I know Mike knows the mental management. He's the one that gave me that book for some of my goals. But but he had to reinvigorate himself in that process. And he was telling himself, I'm just not good enough to win at black belt.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he knew the process. And I want to talk, we just hadn't been able to get him on, but I just wanted to say that, that Mike Brown is who passed that book on to Aaron and I. And I'm so pumped because I hadn't asked you. I didn't want to ask you.
Well,
I didn't want to pressure you. Hey, is that at all a part of your process now? For some reason, I just kept that question to myself.
Well, I'm going to remind you of an event where we did talk about it for a moment, but it was so after you gave me the book and I got it and I read it and studied it and made all my highlights in my book, and I go back and even if I don't go back and reread the book, I go back to all those bookmarks and those footnotes, and those are the things I skim over. They kind of get me back into that. The things that I might be missing. But anyway, so the first tournament I did after reading the book, one of Lanny's methods is write down your goal in past tense.
Mm-hmm.
And it was blue belt. It was the tap cancer out. And I wrote in my journal, I won tap cancer out, whatever date, whatever. And after I won it, I took a picture of it and sent it to you.
That's right. I do remember that. Okay.
And that was like,
that's right.
That was that confirmation that everything worked. And I didn't do too many tournaments. Seems like I did another one after that. But I didn't lose a match in jiu-jitsu until the finals at Pans last year after applying that.
I did think that was the case, but now you do remind me that you sent me that. So awesome, man. It works. Mike always said it's like magic, and it really is. It's an outstanding, exponentially important. Yeah,
Well,
and it's
you know what? I'll tell you what it does for you, and you can see it better this year. Granted, I'm a year more studied in jujitsu and application than last year. But the difference is if you ever watch footage of people, and I wish I had more footage of me before and after. I think what people would find is they go to the gym, they roll, whether they start standing, whether they start from the knees, whatever. They have like this game they play, and they're having fun, and they're maybe something's a little fancy, maybe something's a little this, and then they go compete, and everything locks up. Then all of a sudden there's the clinch happens, and then you get to top side control, and you just freeze, and you're just like just a lot of all the plans go out the window. But what a good mental management program does for you is makes you roll in those tournaments like you do on Sunday open mat. And
yeah,
you've seen me roll enough to know that looked like me my first match. You've seen me do that all day long.
yep,
The
yep.
second match, he was a really game guy, very strong, and it looks like we stalled out for about 2 or 3 minutes, but it was really like just not. I'm not making a mistake, and you've seen me do that. Roll just like that for just kind of hang out in half guard and make sure the grips don't happen, and then that back roll half guard sweep. How many times? That's like that's my thing. So
You swept me with that sweep more than I can count,
but
and because that was what turned the
yes,
tide in that match.
and
Yeah,
that was the first score. But that's what when I think about those matches and analyze them, it's because I rolled no different than I do any other time, because whereas before you might play a lot of different games, you might be more prone to initiate a scramble or things like that, whereas you get in a tournament and you're like every point counts, and you kind of freak out, and you kind of the anxiety gets you and the adrenaline's pumping. But that will make you look just like you roll any other time. And that's the difference in, you look at the Mika Galvals and like the super high level, the Tynan Dalpras and Busheshas and all them. If you ever watch them training, they look no different than when they're competing,
yep,
because they're used to it. They do it all the time. They have their mental prep. But for us average humans, I would highly recommend, train hard, train specifically, read Lanny's book with some seriousness, with some study, apply those principles. And the goal is to feel like you are just going to another match, whether it's open mat, whether it's your comp prep or whatever. And even though the guys, the team we took down there, they didn't all necessarily read Lanny's book, but I preached that a lot. When they would start talking, don't worry, no, don't start talking down that you're worried about this. Nope, you're not worried about anything. You've already won. It's just a matter of doing it. It's going to be relaxed. If you lose, no big deal, but nobody cares. What we want to do is we want to see the good things you do. We want to prepare for everything that we can prepare for. Run pathways. We did comp prep on Mondays, and then we broke off during the week and did a lot. But we worked our takedowns. We didn't overload ourselves. We had a plan. We got, okay, everybody picked 3 takedowns. Have a plan for this grip, or this grip. Now let's do open guard passing. Let's do this, and let's do, we didn't overwhelm ourselves, and we also didn't just, hammer our heads against the wall with just hard rolling. We just did very specific rolling for very specific drills over and over and over and over again. And if you go back and look at everybody from Clay's to Mike's and Craig's, even my own, if you had seen any of our competition prep classes, everybody did almost exactly what they practiced going into it. And I think, and because we had prepared so much like that, and because even vicariously through me kind of preaching the Bassham method at them, everybody came away saying that they were surprised at how calm they were going into, it was their own mental, I'm not taking credit for that, but they were, I think we as a team, Lee guiding us through some drills, and we were like, and our experience from last year Pans going into this one, and we're like, okay. And then of course, we talked to other people who competed a lot, but we tried to whittle it down to just talk to yourself correctly, be
Well, and Chris, I want to say this is a good opportunity to say a shout out to Mike, Craig, and Clay, and how proud we are of them as well, because they kicked ass too, and they definitely deserve the recognition that they do deserve. And because they were in the arena, at a top level international tournament, so and it is one of those things too, and that's why I don't. You may or may not notice this, but that's why I text to you guys before you went up. I don't say good luck.
Yeah.
I don't think that does anything for anybody. That's why when I knew you guys were going up, I said, when I text you, I said, "Hey, Chris, you're going to be your best performer self." And the only reason I'm bringing that up is that it's part of the process and a mental cue that
Absolutely.
I think so important. And actually, this is for audience members. I'm actually stating this for audience members. You can tell somebody good luck, and that's all nice and well and good, but man, instead tell them, hey, you're going to be your best performer self, because that will, already put that mental cue in their head. So yeah, that's a awesome.
Yeah. And like
awesome story, man.
Just wait until, so this wasn't Craig's first tournament, and Craig is awesome. I mean, he's one of the better blue belts I've seen,
absolutely,
but he's also in arguably one of the most competitive weight classes as well.
Oh yeah.
So, and he was competitive. He ran into a couple of roadblocks with his first match, but he also walked away not aggravated, depressed. He was like, "Well, that was fun. Now I know what to expect," and that broke the ice for him in IBJJF and a Grand Slam. So his first IBJJF ever was also a Grand Slam. Clay hasn't been training that long, and he's only been, he only started doing the comp class with us, just a couple of months before Pans, and he did awesome. His first IBJJF, and he won a match, lost a match, no big deal. He did, and his first match was just astounding. It looked like our comp training. He just rushed the guy, went in, did everything perfect, and got the submission. And then the one that we all kind of like chuckle about is Mike has never competed ever. And his first competition is at IBJJF International Pan American Tournament.
I didn't know that. And his first match, he
dominated.
He freaking kicked that. Dominate. That's the word I use. Dominated.
Rock on.
That guy, yeah. His opponent was, a good guy. Nothing against him. He had some tricks up his sleeve, but Mike shut him down. But you've been under Mike's top pressure. It's not fun. Yep. It's not a good place to be. And even the guy that he lost to in the next round was a mongrel. That guy was,
man, huge, yeah. Man. And Mike showed me a picture of the dude. That dude was, yeah. I mean, he looked like he was 20 pounds heavier,
muscle,
and and about 5 inches taller. I don't know that he was, but he looked that. Yeah, his
But
dude was massive.
but
man.
Craig and Mike especially, they walked away from it without if nothing else, they walked away hungry to correct and go again, versus like I used to be, where I would just beat myself up for the loss. Whatever, they did great, and we talked about the great matches, everything they did good. We know what there are very few corrections that even need to happen. It's just maybe just a natural evolution of their jiu-jitsu journey, and those things would be kind of taken care of by attrition. So I can't wait till I don't know about World Masters. I think Lee and Craig are definitely planning on World Masters, but we'll all be back at Pans next year because it's easy. It's in Florida. It's a short drive. It's on the East Coast. You don't have to worry about flight delays and stuff if you don't want to go that route. And so it's like my mind's already ready for next year.
Cool.
And like next year, I think the goal for me is, so just let you know, like my plan through the mental management was, the goal is to win gold at Pans, weight division. If I didn't win gold, I would always do open weight. The only problem with that is, because I'm not planning it, it's hard to accomplish it.
Sure.
But I won the gold. I said, okay, I'm not worried about open weight. I won the gold. I'm going to live with that this year. I'm happy with that. And now next year's goal will be to plan on doing gold in both. That way,
awesome.
I'm not taking my foot off the gas after. Even if I win my weight division, I want to be mentally prepared. Know that there's a double goal. I mean, there's a double goal here. But it all has to be planned.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Excellent.
sir.
And I'll tell you, I'm glad you brought this book up. That was an awesome story about the conversation you had with Eric.
Yep.
And I'll tell you what, I've been struggling with a few things. Part of it is because of an injury I have, but you bringing that up is encouraging me. That's why I didn't wait till we were done with the podcast to grab my copy of this and go through it again.
Yeah, I'm seeing
So,
it. Mine's next to me over here too.
But I think this is a good point to move on to the most important part of the show. I love jiu-jitsu. I love shooting and all that stuff, but this is the most important aspect. Okay, Chris, what are your 3 favorite artists and or bands? However you want to hit it, buddy.
I've been obsessing about these questions all day. These are anxiety. But so being as old as I am, I have 5 decades of music, and I've loved music since I could have cognitive reasoning. So
rock on.
So I remember the songs that were on the radio when my mom would take us to nursery school before school. So it's difficult to come down to favorites, because in the 70s, I loved R&B funk and the Bee Gees and the Americana. Just everything was great in the 70s. You almost couldn't miss. Even some of the disco was good. Just the musicianship was outstanding. So, and then in the 80s, one of the greatest eras for peace and unity there ever was. You have so, and then once the 90s came around in the 2000s, once the internet broke, it's so hard to not be exposed to so much stuff that there's you can be listening to a phenomenal, like I'm a song hunter now. I don't even care about bands so much as I'm a song hunter. I can find
That's cool.
some country song that's phenomenal, and I'm not like a huge country fan, but that happens to be a fantastic song. And then you turn around and listen to some fantastic young metalcore band that's a bunch of 19-year-olds that just have a sound that's phenomenal. So I think what I'll do is, even if they're not my current favorites, I'm going to list my favorites as at some point in my life I was obsessed with them. Where there's
That's a good way to approach it.
so like the first one I'm going to say, and I'm going to have to do it in eras too. I'm going to say my first super favorite band was Def Leppard in the Pyromania Hysteria era.
It's a good time period.
Yeah, because I was in the 8th grade when Pyromania was big, and I could tell you every note, every song, every hit, whatever in Pyromania. And then when Hysteria came out, it kind of slipped in because of all the years in between. And Hysteria was so important to me that as a 16-year-old driving to work, my tape broke in the deck, and I just pulled over to Kmart and bought another one, put it in the deck, and kept going to work. So
Awesome.
I'm going to say Def Leppard in that era was like my first obsessive band that I loved. The second one would be Rush in the Moving Pictures, Power Windows, Hold Your Fire, Roll the Bones era. I really got introduced to them during high school, and I loved those 4 albums. My first date with my wife was to a Roll the Bones concert. Rush Roll the Bones. So
we went to that concert, didn't we, Aaron?
Yeah, I was going to say something.
I went that 3 times, but one of them was with Gina. So Def Leppard and Def Leppard is one of Gina's favorite bands, so it's like something we have in common. And Rush has always got a special place in my heart, especially that era of those particular albums. Moving Pictures and Power Windows are probably my favorites of all time. And then the third, if I had to narrow it down to 3, would probably be Tool in the Anima era, because that album it stayed playing all the time. I kind of fell out of love with them for a minute during 10,000 Days in Lateralis, not because they weren't fantastic albums, but it was just, I had such a love of Anima, and then I was getting to the point where I was kind of stopping. I was retiring from being a musician, and was kind of like, I need a break from heavy music, kind of sort of, to kind of reassess and just get quiet for a little while. And it took me probably 10 or 15 years to go back and like really appreciate those albums like I do now. So like those 3 probably be like what I'd have to say my lifetime favorites of like 3 different eras. But like my favorite artists, that goes way different because like as a vocalist, I have to add another favorite. I have to add a favorite.
There really are no rules.
Yeah.
That's a starting point, my man.
So I was obsessed with Queensryche during the Rage for Order, Operation Mindcrime, and Empire era.
Yeah.
And so I really loved that band for those eras. But as like I was a vocalist. So interestingly enough, I think that even though like Jeff Tate from Queensryche was a phenomenal singer, he got kind of flaky later, and but he really kind of has a niche voice,
Yeah, he does.
But like my favorite voices were probably Steve Perry of Journey is one of the most phenomenal voices ever, live, recorded, whatever. And my other favorite is Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates.
Oh
I
yeah.
think if you listen to him at any era, he has like he can sing R&B, he can sing rock, he's got a rasp, he can falsetto, whatever. He's just one of my favorites. And then as I grew older and wasn't confined to spending my money on an album, you know, plus being a musician sometimes, especially a young musician, you kind of get pigeonholed into styles and you kind of don't want to open your eyes to a lot of other things. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have as much of an appreciation for like bands like Led Zeppelin or the Beatles or Pink Floyd until my 40s and 50s, when I really kind of went back and got to revisit those without having to go buy an album. So like I've become kind of obsessed with David Gilmour's guitar playing.
Cool.
Like his leads are, because I came from the 80s and 90s where, speed and virtuosity was a thing, and
Yep.
then into the anti with the grunge where you were supposed to pretend like you didn't know how to play guitar and
Yes.
and all that. So, but then when you go back and realize just what a phenomenal body of work David Gilmour has done. Just even if I can't remember words to Pink Floyd songs, but I remember his leads.
Cool.
So like one of my favorite guitar players. The musicians in Tool are like my favorite musicians because nobody sounds like them. They have a genre all their own.
Well, Chris, if I can add one thing,
Do it.
and Todd Fox, if you're listening, I know you do in many cases. We need to follow up on Maynard,
Yeah,
because we had spoke with a buddy of ours, Todd Fox, who's his and many other bands security manager, asking him to see if Maynard would come on our show. So we're working on it.
It looks like Maynard's love for jiu-jitsu has never decreased, but if nothing else, it's increased, like revitalized since he got his black belt.
Yep.
And he got his gym going in Verde Valley and everything. But
Which is precisely why we wanted to have him on, because of the connection with Todd Fox,
yeah,
and the fact of his black belt.
yeah, Todd's a very interesting guy too. I enjoyed his podcast with you guys.
Awesome. Yeah,
Cool.
he's a great dude.
Man, all excellent questions. I loved hearing the styles that you liked and the bands. And we had one of my favorite musicians, Jason Bieler, on a few episodes quite a few episodes ago, and he even mentioned Def Leppard and a few other bands, and he said, really, there's two kinds of music: good music and the other
Yeah,
kind. So, and you said you song hunt. I like that concept because one of my prime examples of music where I would never own one of her albums, or and I don't think I have any. Okay, two of them. First would be the song "It's Never Really Over" by Katy Perry. Dude, it is a brilliant song. And sounds great, and I can't wait to crank it up on my new stereo in my car when it gets done next week. But and then another one is from a movie called Don't Look Up on Netflix. It's a song that Ariana Grande did on there, and not my kind of music at all, but it's freaking amazing music, incredible vocal melodies, and dude, set aside some of the, frankly, depravity I think that she lives in. Her voice, we thought that Whitney Houston was good.
oh yeah,
We thought that, and when they were, but what I'm saying is, we had Whitney Houston, we had Mariah Carey, dude. Ariana Grande is ridiculous.
she is.
So
It's like with like I said, when the internet broke, it crippled the music industry's hold on the funnels that we were supposed to go
amen.
to. And
Amen. And that's what me and Jason talked
yeah,
about. Jason Bieler talked about is that now bands that got shoved off to the side with grunge all those guys make a dang good living again.
Yeah. But you can like, my son is 20, and a band that was really dear to us, like it was, because it was like, once I kind of took a couple of years off of just like inundating myself with the heavy music scene, because I love heavy music. I mean, you listen to my playlist, it's mostly heavy music now, but like Breaking Benjamin was a band that he and I listened to when he was very young, and we helped program him to like heavy music. But he also, like, we share an Apple iTunes account, and there's no, man, I think he finds the most obscure stuff, but it's good. You know, there's like, I peruse an album that he's added, and there's like one song I like it, because I'm looking for those perfect songs, whatever genre it is. And by perfect, I mean, you just can't imagine it being any better. How it was written, who performed it, the sound.
Oh man, we think the same, man. That's cool.
Or I look for those magic moments in a song where the song's okay, but then like this key shift halfway through, or there's a song by Michelle Indigo-Cello called "Fool of Me." The song's good, but there's this one place, and I dare you to go listen to it, where somewhere it's the first verse, I think, she goes into this just lush harmony for like 2 seconds, and that is the whole song. You'll just repeat it just to hear that one spot. But uh, you can go back and rediscover old bands. I went back and for some reason looked up Mother Love Bone, the band that spawned Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, all them, with the death of the singer, and I was amazed at how good it was, and very akin to like the Cult. Like it was a bridge between bands like the Cult and grunge. And because of the internet, we can just go and some of my favorite bands that I've listened to in the last couple of years, because Lee and I have a lot of overlapping similar taste in music. A lot of bands are not signed bands that just had their album out, and then you happen to see it, somebody linked it that is similar to Seven Dust, or it's similar to another band, and you're like, okay, try it out, and it's just some band from like Plano, Texas, that has no record deal, that just recorded a great album, because now studios are phenomenal, and like home studios are phenomenal, and you can just get some really good music that nobody's heard, and everybody is capable. And like you said, Ariana Grande, Madonna has like, Madonna and I are like polar opposites when it comes to anything to do with living or politics or anything else. But I was alive with her heyday with True Blue and some of the earlier stuff, and she's got a song called "Rain" that is beautiful. You just got to give credit. Sometimes these people, you wouldn't necessarily want to throw water on them if they were on fire, but they can come up with great production and have a great song. And
bro, I love some of the old Madonna music, and I love George Michael.
Oh, absolutely.
So, man, we're clearly on the same page. Yeah,
it's funny. Only you guys are old enough to understand this. I went and bought Van Halen 5150 and Madonna True Blue at the same time on vinyl.
Rock on.
two polar opposites types of music, but that's where I was at that time. So imagine my kind of appetite once the internet came up, and Apple iTunes and Spotify and everything came out, and you could just find anything you wanted.
Now, forgive my even though I'm a rock guitar player, my favorite guitar player is Paul Gilbert from Mr. Big and
Racer X.
Several others. Oh yeah, definitely. You can see a Paul Gilbert signature.
I thought of that when I saw it earlier. One of the greatest rock licks, in my opinion, of all time is the intro and outro to Green Tinted 60s Mine. That is a mesmerizing, hypnotic, one of the most complicated. Nobody can play it like Paul Gilbert, and it's a great song, But then he just did that to be, and we saw him do it live when Mr. Big was on tour at small clubs, and it was just like that was the height of the night. Was him
Bro,
popping that?
I'm just trying I'm trying to keep it together here. Because you
Yeah.
bringing a tear to my
We're
eye.
soulmates.
Dang.
Yeah, I remember.
Guys, I'm at to let y'all go. Okay. What is? I was waiting for you to say that.
Yeah, there you go. You know,
I'm serious. And in all seriousness, man, hold on a second. And then we got to get off here. Okay, so about 3 weeks ago, I was able to see Mr. Big on their farewell tour here in Oklahoma City, and Paul was literally only the whole night was literally only about 5 feet away from me, and they put what was cool is they opened with a few songs, and then they started on which was the most influential album in my entire life. Was Lean Into It with Green Tin 60s Mind on it. That album changed me from just focusing on guitar, believe it or not, with a very guitar oriented band, but made me focus on songs and vocal melodies.
Yep.
And so that was literally the most pivotal album in my life and the most pivotal player. And then Green Tinted 60s Mind. If you ask me what was my favorite song, it would be a tie between Green Tinted 60s Mind and MIA by the Foo Fighters. Those are my two favorite songs. But I'm rattling on here to say that night when he played the last section of Green Tinted 60s Mind, when he played that lick for the last time, I actually did tear up a little bit.
Oh, it's an awesome lick.
And it's not just because, and it was mainly because it was one of my favorite pieces of music, but that I was literally watching him play my favorite piece of music for the last time with that band.
Well, the thing with,
so
Paul, real quick, is like I said, I was around and doing music and listening to music and all that with 80s glam and 80s progressive, Fates Warning, but then also Racer X and Impellitteri and Malmsteen and the whole virtuosity thing. And when Mr. Big came out, it was a shock to a lot of us musicians and guitar fans that the guy who could play sweeps faster than anybody else suddenly stopped doing it and playing more of a song oriented thing, and it is like you wanted to dislike it for about 30 seconds and then you couldn't, and then it didn't work. You still liked it. And he kind of to me, he was like the pivotal virtuoso guitar player that said it was okay to write good songs, and that you didn't always have to play fast. You could play, and then, and like I said, no matter, people can emulate all the time the speed or the virtuoso or whatever. But Caleb and I went down a YouTube rabbit hole one night of everybody covering Green Tinted 60s Mind just to see if we could find anybody who could play that lick that felt like that, and not a single person could do it. Nobody could do it.
Well, real quick before we get off here, I just want to mention that and Aaron ended up taking online video lessons from Paul Gilbert for a while. How long was that, Aaron?
Oh, it was about 3 years.
Rock guitarist, because that was your name. What that was your login name, wasn't it? Your handle.
He's such a lovable nerd too. Paul Gilbert's awesome.
Oh, bro, he is. I've met him, and boy, we're just on a rabbit hole here. But I've spent enough time with him in person and on the lessons and all that stuff. He is an unbelievably cool person.
Yeah, I agree.
there's a handful of people I'm talking about in my life that I would consider some of the coolest human beings. One of them is my brother. One of them is the guy that builds my guitars, Saul Cole, and then one of them is Paul Gilbert.
Yeah, it's difficult to meet your heroes, and it's gratifying that one in 100 that actually lives up to your hype.
Yeah, yeah, man, what a fun conversation! Holy cow!
Thanks.
You really didn't make me cry, but you did floor me because when you started saying that, I thought he's going to talk about Green 10 to 60's mine, and then when you did, I just about fell over.
Yeah, that was really cool. That's really cool. Well, our audience would flog us if we didn't at least bring in one firearms question.
Okay.
What's your concealed carry, buddy?
My concealed carry is a Gen 5 26, Glock 26, with the pinky extender on the magazine. My wife's is a Gen 4 26, but we also have I have a Gen 5 19. Sorry, I have a Gen 5 19, and she has a Gen 4 19. She has the two Gen 4s. I've got the two Gen 5s, but she chose them because she liked the finger grooves and that were in the Gen 4s, and I could live without them. So I liked them. I still love it, and because the Gen 4s, I feel like they redid the tension on the rack, and she had a lot easier time with the Gen 4s. So but we both kind of, we started with the 19s and we liked them and kind of like, but then I liked, I had seen the 43 and kind of got a little bit attracted to the shorter barrel just for concealed carry. And, but I liked the double barrel. The double stack. Yeah, the double stack in the magazine of the 26. So I was like, okay, so I get a 26, and if something terrible happens and I start having to pop magazines, I can put my 19 magazines and will fit in there with that much more. So so we have those, but we both carry the 26s with us.
Excellent.
Well, and Chris, you may have seen my pistol before, but this is my that's right. Yeah, that's my 19 Gen 5 that I've done a little bit of customization to. What I will end with is that I would love to have you and Gina invite Lee and Brittany out, and maybe a couple other folks as a guest to run our 8-hour curriculum.
Oh yeah,
if you guys are game. I know we've talked about that for a minute, getting together and shooting, but it is definitely in order. So let's try to make that happen. I would just love for you guys to come out and
I'm overdue to actually fire live. We got we did get like a little Strikeman, I think, dry fire with the laser, so we can at least keep practice racking and shooting dry fire. But we haven't done live fire in a long time. So
the fact that, and I've talked with you about this before, the fact that you guys are dry firing, is 95-99% of people don't dry fire. So that's awesome, buddy. Well, listen, Chris, I knew this was going to be a blast, man.
I was hoping so. I kind of felt like I'm a purple belt old guy, kind of boring. So you have some.
Not at all. Pretty. I told you, man, the last time we spoke about this. See, Aaron and I are really good judges of how guests are going to be, and I think, Aaron, you might agree and or admit to this as well. We can kind of tell when people will be a good guest.
Oh, good.
Yep, and not just a good guest, but a good show with that guest.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? If that makes sense, that's a little bit different, right?
Well, I hope that if you have any listeners that like sometimes I think when I listen to podcasts, and I love listening to the elite people and high level people, describe things but sometimes I think it's a little sometimes it's daunting when you compare you're at the beginning of the journey and they're like 10, 15 years in. Maybe I can be help somebody who's just starting. I'm not that far into. I'm halfway through. But there's been a lot of benefit from my jiu-jitsu journey just in the 7 years I've been doing it. And maybe that's not, we can, you and I and Aaron can present some goals to people that haven't just started, but also aren't so daunted by looking at the 15, 20 year elite competitor. You can still get benefit out of this, and still have.
Oh, there's no question, Chris, and your articulation of how, with winning in mind and excuse me, Lanny Basham's protocols is beneficial to everybody from the beginner to the elite,
including me.
So,
you inspired me to get my dang book out again.
There you go. I mean, it's not just for jiu-jitsu. I mean, obviously, it's
for everything.
For everything.
Well, actually,
everything you can perform.
Yep, I've used it for more goals outside of jiu-jitsu than jiu-jitsu. So awesome. Mainly on the shooting and performance side of the pressure testing and the shiv work side, all that stuff. So well, Chris,
I've had a blast,
man.
bro.
I guess what's that?
I've had a blast. It's been pretty fun.
We'll do it again, Chris. And I guess I'll see you tomorrow at class.
Yeah, and Aaron, you got to come visit and get on the mats. You got a blue belt now, right?
Yes, I do, and I really want to. Within the next year, I'm going to be at Eric's place.
Yep.
So just as long as
Hold Fast JiuJitsu.
So I'll see you and hang out with you sometime this year, Chris. Absolutely. How's that sound?
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, buddy. Hey, y'all have a good night. Take it easy.
Thank you, guys.